Hello everybody, welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. I'm Bill, and today we're going to be talking about an Irish whiskey called Roe Co. Now this is, I know, not quite Irish Whiskey Month, I'm a little bit early here, but I have a few that I want to get through this year, so I'm starting early, and you guys will like it. So, this is Roe Co, which is a revival of a historic distillery from Dublin, and it's backed entirely by Diageo, and we're going to talk about this. We'll do our usual history, we'll taste it, we'll nose it, and we'll talk about whether it's worth it. But more importantly, is this worth the name? Because Roe Co originally was pretty important. The original Roe Co Distillery dates back to 1757 when Peter Roe founded the George Roe Distillery on Thomas Street in Dublin. By the 19th century, Roe Co was one of the largest names in all of Irish whiskey, alongside brands like Bushmills and Jameson. And they were making millions of gallons of whiskey, they owned 17 acres of land, and they had this really iconic tower which you can actually see on the bottle as well. Like a lot of Irish whiskey brands, when Prohibition hit and blended Scotch took off, they ended up having to close down around 1926. Nearly a century later, in 2019, Diageo opened up a new version of Roe Co that was focusing more on traditional style of whiskey making as well as cask influence. Roe Co is a blended Irish whiskey, combining both malt and grain whiskeys. It's aged predominantly in first fill bourbon barrels. It's 45% ABV, a little higher than the usual 40% found in a lot of Irish whiskeys at this price. It's non-chill filtered, and its price is around $35 to $40. On to the nosing and the tasting, and actually I don't usually do this, but the color here, if you look at the color, knowing that this is usually put into first fill bourbon barrels, I'm not surprised to see a darker color on something that is likely fairly young, and also just thinking about the bourbon, it's going to probably be caramel as well as vanilla. So let's go into the nosing and the tasting. Surprisingly, very little alcohol on the nose here. I'm truly surprised, actually, because I just don't think that this has sat around for very long. I mean, they opened in 2019. At most, they're a few years old, right? But this does have those notes of vanilla and caramel, as well as things like apple and peach and, well, yeah, pear, of course. I mean, you don't usually get apple without getting pear. It's very sweet, like almost like a white sugar. This is actually a really nice nose. Very pleasant. A lot of times on Irish whiskeys, the nose is pleasant, but not complex. This has quite a bit going on, and I'm thanking those bourbon barrels for this. All right, let's go ahead and have a taste. Cheers. A little more malty than I was expecting. Also, yeah, cinnamon. All right, so on the taste here, some of the main things that I'm getting here are cinnamon, for sure. That's like the first and foremost. And it's melding really well with that slightly higher ABV to the point where, you know, what have I talking for 10 seconds or so? I'm still getting the finish here. Like, it's actually hard to talk. So the ABV and the cinnamon mix really well together. So it makes just a more pronounced cinnamon flavor. There's some nutmeg in there as well, vanilla, oak for sure. Loses some of those fruits to me. I will say that just like on the bottle, it even says that you should be tasting things like apple. I don't taste any of that. I really am kind of overwhelmed with that cinnamon flavor and the nutmeg and the spices in general. So that is a big chunk of it. This is a lot more influenced by the bourbon than I was expecting with an Irish. Let me have another sip here. Very mild vanilla flavor. I think that's really it. I was expecting to have this taste a little bit more floral or fruity. Either way, it just kind of tastes like an easy drinking bourbon. Like, you could give this to me and I would think it was a bourbon. I would probably cite it as having lower ABV than what I think it does, because I would think it was predominantly just cinnamon from a barrel. Okay, let's talk overall here, because there's a few things going on. It's a good whiskey, but it's a little boring. But it's also like $35. So, tempering my expectations a little bit, does this compete with other things at that level? And I absolutely think it does, especially in the way of Irish whiskeys. Does it taste like an Irish whiskey? No. It tastes like a bourbon to me. Kind of like a watery bourbon, if you want to think of it that way, and I'm sure that's just because it's an Irish whiskey. So, it's a little interesting. Like, if I'm thinking about what I would want to buy with $35, if I'm going Irish whiskey and I like bourbon, this is a wonderful choice. But is that ever a situation that happens? Is that you want to buy an Irish whiskey, but you like bourbon? Typically, I think it's going to be more the, I love bourbon and I want to buy a Scotch, or I love bourbon and of course I'm going to buy bourbon. So this, I'm not sure who this is for. I think I would rather try some other expressions from them. You know, they say that they're really focusing on the barrel, which is clear. This barrel is coming through almost entirely. But if they're focusing on the barrel, it'd be cool to see what they do with some other things like sherry, or even French oak would be really cool. So for me, just because of the price, I'm gonna give it a try. Like, I don't think you're gonna miss out on this one, but I also think this could become something that you just keep around because of the inexpensive quality of it. Yeah, let's go try it. Try it. It might be for you. If so, then you're probably gonna want to keep this on hand. If it's not for you, just because it doesn't do anything special, then I still think it's worth your time to try. There's a couple of alternatives I would suggest to the Roe Co. if this is something that you enjoy or if it's something that you don't enjoy. So if you like this, but you're kind of a little sad that maybe some of the fruit notes didn't come out on the palate as much, look for something like Bushmills 10. This is going to lower that bourbon influence just a bit, but it's also going to bring out some of the apple and pear and just fruit notes in general. It's also just about the same price. This is like $35, this is about $38, so negligible. Then we also have something a little cheaper, which is going to be the Powers Gold Label. Now, this is not going to quite do what this does as well. It's got a little bit more bite to it, just it's not as well refined, but it's still a good solid pour, and it's about $20. So that's something worth knowing. If this is not where you want to be, this is a good alternative. Another option, and I'm not quite really suggesting this anymore. I used to love this and I would suggest it to everybody, but I think the price point has gotten stupid lately, is the Jameson Black Barrel. I just looked this up a couple minutes ago and I'm really hoping it was wrong. It said it was $80. No, don't buy this for $80. That's insanity. This used to be something I would recommend if you liked Jameson, you might want to move up to the Black Barrel because it was like $10 more, maybe. If this is $80, just walk out of the store.
Editor Bill here. Thankfully, I made a mistake. When I was looking this up, I don't know what website I saw it on. Somebody was just trying to scalp it. I looked up on Total Wine. This is about $40. Totally worth it at that price.
Thank you very much for joining me here on the Whiskey Dictionary. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Cheers.